Let's talk about troubleshooting a weed eater. One of these little rascals can be a nightmare if you can't start it. There's nothing worse than being out working somewhere and having one of these little machines that just won't crank. And so I'm going to give you some tips to hopefully that'll help you overcome some of the problems that you have with getting one of these little rascals cranked. You need about 3 different things to make a weed eater run. You need a spark, you need gas coming to it, and you need an airflow coming to it inside that cylinder to make the it spark and make it run. Compressed air and all that good stuff. They're basically very simple and easy to maintain and operate once you learn a little bit about them. If your spark plug is going bad, it'll do a couple things to you that make you think that you've got something else wrong with it. If you smell gas when you crank it up, and you're giving it gas, and you're choking it, and you're doing everything that you're supposed to do to crank it, and it's kind of flooding on you and not cranking like it's supposed to, and you're sitting there pulling, and it won't crank. If your spark plug is not sparking like it's supposed to, it's not going to burn the gas inside the cylinder, and therefore, yes, it is going to flood on you. So that can cause a flooding situation for you. And another thing too that can hurt you on that is if you push too much gas inside, if you keep pumping when your bubble is good and tight, you can push too much gas in there and cause it to flood as well. So, and you're going to smell a very strong smell of gasoline when you get ready to start cranking it up and start pulling on it, and you'll know that it's been flooded. But you don't know if it's a flooding problem or a spark plug problem. And the way that you can find out is simply take your spark plug out and replace it, put another one in, and see if it'll crank. And usually a nice fresh spark plug will fire right up every time. There's something about changing that spark plug that's just a miracle cure. So that'll usually get you going. I always keep one brand new spark plug at least all the time, and if I use it up, I go to the store next time, I get another one, because these things are very temperamental, and that's an easy fix, and they're very cheap, a couple bucks, you know. So I always have a spare. So that can be a flooding or a bad spark plug. The other thing is your air filter. Your air filter over a period of time can get stopped up. You can look at it and it might not look like it's stopped up, but the way you can tell is if you don't get enough power from your machine or don't crank like it's supposed to, take that filter off and see if it will crank and run like it's supposed to without it on there. And sometimes it's a little bit too much rich for it. It won't run exactly like it's supposed to. But blow it out with an air hose, and try not to mess it up. If it's one of the sponge type filters, you can probably clean that out and let it dry out. But clean that filter out, put it back on, and see if you got a different result than you did. Get you a new one. Replace it with a new one though. Don't really keep that old one on there. Keep it as a spare if you need one, but change that filter out and see if that'll cure your problem. The other problem that I've had with weed eaters is sometimes you'll get your exhaust will get stopped up. And the only way your weed eater will start, maybe it'll crank up and it'll just idle, but when you rev it up it'll cut off because all the exhaust can't go out and it can't run. When you start to pull on your weed eater to crank it, put your hand over the exhaust when it's cold. Don't burn your hand. Put your hand over the exhaust and see how much airflow is coming out of there. You should feel it, a good thump every time that cylinder compresses and pushes the air out of the exhaust, you should feel a really good airflow coming out of that exhaust. If you don't, then maybe you could have a problem there. So be sure to check that out real good. If you feel like that is a problem, like on this particular weed eater, this is a Shindawa T230. It's one of the older ones. It's got 2 bolts. Take your cover off. You got a little tool. You got your little handy tool that looks just like this. Most weed eaters come with one. And take this little rascal with you everywhere you go. If the weed eater goes with you, you take this tool with you. It's very easy to get everything apart, and usually that tool will open the weed eater right up and do most things that you need to do to it out in the field. So it's great. Take your exhaust off and put your spark plug wire back on. You can leave the cover off and see if it'll fire up and how it runs without the exhaust on there. If it'll fire up and run and really sound like a brand new machine and just give you all the power in the world that you didn't have without the exhaust on there, you know that it's time to get another exhaust. I have opened up the hole in the exhaust before, just punched a hole in there to where the air could flow out. You're not supposed to do that, but I just took a screwdriver and punched a hole in it, and it really turned the machine on, and it ran well after that. Never had any more problems with it, but the exhaust was stopped up. On the gasoline side of it, these new ethanol gases, they disintegrate these little hoses, and this weed eater is old. It's got a lot of use on it, and but the little hoses down inside the tank, that ethanol, it disintegrates these hoses. And if you're not getting enough gas coming up to your carburetor, or if it's sucking air, you're not going to get, it's not going to run like it's supposed to. It's going to run terrible, and you're going to know you got a problem. So, and they're pretty easy to fix. You have to take your tank off, pull the little hoses out, and just put you some new hoses back on. Also check the filter on the inside of the tank. You have to check that filter to make sure it's not clogged up. But every time that you are out in the field working on one of these things and have to use it all day, you want it to crank and run. And hopefully it should crank up and run just like this right here. See, I pulled that one time and it fired up and run. And this is an old Shindawa T230, so you got to do your maintenance on them, keep them up. And the one other thing that I would mention here, mix your gas and oil for it properly. Like on most of the Shindawa products, they're 40-to-1 mixture. Make sure that you mix your gas and oil properly. If you're putting too much oil in your gas, it's going to make it smoke. You're going to lose power. And on the other part of it, if you run it too lean, you're not going to give the internal parts of the motor enough lubrication, and you can burn up your weed eater. So you gotta mix it just right. Don't try to overmix or undermix. Mix it just exactly like it's supposed to be, and do it exact, and you're going to get a lot better running condition out of your machine. It's going to last longer, and it's going to perform for you like you want it to. So keep those things in mind when you're out in the field trying to get your weed eater running.